All right. So a video, I think. Let's see what happens. Let's see. I want to talk about, well, yeah, so I had something pretty remarkable happen today. And yeah, basically I had this interaction with somebody at work. Well, let me back up a little bit. So I've been working at a grocery store for a while, not that long. I think 2.5 months, something like that. Guess I got hired about 3 months ago. Then there was the first position, and I wasn't getting any hours, so there's kind of a gap, and then I got switched over into a different position. Basically, yeah, working in the produce section at a big grocery store. And yeah, there's a lot I could say about that. But it's been a challenge. It's been a big challenge in so many ways for me. Just getting acclimated. That doesn't feel like the right word. Getting into this role and working. It's a nice grocery store. It's pretty nice. It's a new place, a new grocery store. I've had little exposures here and there. I worked at night shift, overnight shift at another grocery store. And that was very challenging, working that shift. So that it just meant that you're basically asleep during all the business hours of the day when you need to get stuff done. There was just all kinds of practical things that were hard. The supervisor was not great. He was a dick. Just say it that way. Not great. But I liked the job itself, the duties. I really liked I like going in and taking stuff off pallets, the physicality of it, stocking, and you know, as far as making money, it's not a bad way to do it. And they're paying pretty good. I think in part because it's overnight shift, so it's kind of hard to get people. Maybe because my certain features of my resume, I don't know. But anyway, so I'm at this place, and it's rough characters. It's rough characters, and immature characters, again, it's like the duties are great, man. It's like produce. Love working with fruit, especially, but putting out produce. Well, I mean, even there's an asterisk because you learn some of the behind the scenes stuff, and but yeah, I like the physicality. Excuse me, I'm still kind of on the mend, a little bit under the weather, but I like the it's a lot of physicality because you're taking these heavy boxes of avocados and bags of potatoes and apples, oranges, trays of stone fruit, nectarines, peaches, pluots, etc., bananas, moving around heavy carts with salads, and so that physicality is great. I really like that. But it's a mixed bag as far as working with people, and so that's actually been very stressful in many ways. And I broke my rib a while back, maybe a month or so before I started this job, or a few weeks. I don't know the timeline, but and I'm not even 100% sure I broke the rib. I definitely messed it up pretty good doing some manual labor, and way overdid it that same day and ended up pulling a bunch of muscles in my back, messing up my back and all this stuff. And I thought it was mostly healed, but something about the repetition of certain movements of, stacking fruits, stacking produce, putting it out on display. There's like certain motions that it's like it re-aggravated, or it either newly aggravated some muscle spasm in my back or re-aggravated it from this injury. Anyways, it's very very painful. Very painful. So that's been a challenge. And they got me taking, quite a bit of, what is it, Tylenol, or acetaminophen and ibuprofen, staggering it throughout the day, which helps to manage it. But then I also have to go to physical therapy now, which is kind of annoying. It's like the day off, I have to go and do this stuff. But anyways, yeah, I mean, gossip. There's just people that work this job that one just seem to have no sense of a work ethic, or just kind of checked out. A lot of I hate to say it, but a lot of the younger employees, kind of difficult to work with. And although even there's some really, bright-eyed and respectful and good workers among that younger cohort. But there's definitely some rough characters, and I don't know. I mean, it's such a big operation, so many moving pieces, and even structurally, just the way that the store is laid out, and the kind of the warehouse back area where the trucks arrive and the pallets get brought in and everything gets broken down. I mean, there's just ways that I don't think it was designed in the best way. It could be a little bit more space, a little bit more capacious. They could double up some of the equipment back there, and I think it would probably make things a little bit easier, especially the space issue. That kind of unnecessarily and inevitably creates friction. So you've got so many people trying to use that same space, but anyways, but yeah, there's just, and in a way, I hesitate to even really go too in depth, because it's just like, this is just a job. This is just how it is, really. Especially, I've had a variety of jobs, and I'm not sure exactly how to say this, so I'm just going to say it and probably say it in an offensive and wrong way, but the better paid and the more educated people are, tends to be a healthier environment. That's I can say that's generally been the case. I've had jobs where I was, one in particular for a number of years where I was salaried, and it was working in, a bit with a bit more of a, I guess, sophisticated or educated cohort, group of people. And there again, though, I mean, I look back on that maybe a little bit too, rose-colored vision, but because there again, there definitely was friction and things, and I learned a lot of skills, I think, about how to navigate that and work with people. But in general, and pretty markedly so, just a much healthier environment. I know I've said this in another video. It's really not about any of the duties in any of these jobs, because I've been, for a variety of reasons I don't need to get into, but really having a time getting employed, and most of what's been available that I've looked at has been, entry level and fairly low paid, and it's really not a matter of the sort of status implied, although I have had some status anxiety and things like that, for sure. But it's not really the duties or the status of the job. Cleaning toilets, that's kind of, that's pushing it a little bit. But, most of the job descriptions of places that are like entry level is not that big of a deal, doing that kind of work, that kind of job. There's dignity in whatever kind of job. It's mostly just that you end up working with really rough people. And I say all this again with some hesitation, because I'm so far from perfect. I'm such an imperfect, flawed person. But anyways, yeah, there's levels of health, in any community, in any workplace, in any whatever spiritual community, any church environment, any wherever wherever two or three are gathered now, wherever, whatever association of individuals, there's going to be levels of health depending, on the people primarily, but also on how, even things down to like the architectural design plays an influence, like I was mentioning, but also just the kind of culture of a place. And so, yeah, that's kind of a preamble. I mean, and I could say a few other things about, working with produce. It's a really interesting thing. I mean, I remember when I first got there, the vision I had for kind of getting back on my feet, getting employed somewhere, was I wanted to work in produce. And I spent months, tried to apply so many different places, couldn't get it, couldn't find it. I'm feeling a little hesitation to tell the story. Anyways, yeah, I guess I don't want to tell that story for some reason. But working produce, I remember when I first got in there, there's this feeling of like, I remember I got set up to the first task or whatever. Really the first task that I got was to put out a new box of limes. And, there is a little bit of I wouldn't say art to it. That'd be going too far, but there's a little bit of a protocol, because you want to, and this goes across, I think, just about anything in a grocery store, any perishable item, anything with expiration date, to some degree. I mean, if it's got a few years out, you really don't have to worry too much about this, but it's a good practice regardless, but especially with produce, is to rotate the produce, because stuff that's out on the trays, not refrigerated. We do have some areas that are cooled, some like, I don't know what you'd call them, islands or carousels. I can't think of the right word. Like for the grapes and the berries that are refrigerated or they're cooled. Salads too, I think. So, that kind of mitigates to some degree the process of ripening and going bad, becoming rotten. But yeah, you got to rotate. Got to rotate your product. So it's not just a matter of going out and just adding new product onto whatever's on display. You got to move it out of the way, lay a new base layer, however high you're stacking, that's a whole nother thing. Different stack heights depending on the sort of relative fragility or constitution, toughness of a particular item. And then once you've added however much of the new produce, you put back, and you're also taking out, whatever's got mold on it or whatever's, obviously no longer suitable to sell. Although, man, there's so much stuff that, see, I've got such a relationship with fruit for so long and care for fruit that the truth is, fruit, when it's at the point where we're asked and pretty much guided to toss it out because it's, starting to, the bananas are getting too many freckles on them, or they've got freckles on them, or I guess too many freckles. Or the stone fruit, the peaches are getting to the point where you can kind of see where people have put a few thumbprints on them or whatever. A lot of what's getting thrown out is aesthetic because visually it's starting to look not as good as when you first put it out. But when you first put out a lot of the items, they're not edible. They're usually a few days of ripening before, if you were to buy it then, you'd want to set it on the counter for a few days. But they visually tend to look a lot, cleaner, no indentations, they just visually, aesthetically look to most people's eyes to be better. But a lot of what gets tossed out, and there's a window here, right? Green, inedible, too hard, getting into the ripe zone, and then, rotten, needs to be tossed out. And so some of a good portion of what gets thrown out is legitimately needs to get thrown out, but a lot of it is just so prime. It's like, if you were to buy this here now, this is as good as the fruit is going to taste. So it's hard to do that, And they don't really want us setting aside produce that's going to get tossed out for our own. And I get that too. I mean, it starts to get messy when we've had customers come in and ask, can you set this aside? Can I get these boxes? Can you set aside the trimmings of the broccoli or whatever? And it's like economies of scale. And when you're working in a store that big, and you've got so many other things to do, you just really have to say no. At a certain point, you just have to say, no, hell no, I'm not going to do that. And they don't want to make all these special exceptions where this, employee it gets to keep this stuff that would be thrown out, and so it doesn't really work that way. But man, it's kind of hard to see all that produce, and some of it we can kind of recycle because we've got another department, fresh cuts, and they can kind of, if it's a pint, a pint of strawberries or whatever, a pound of strawberries in a carton, and some of them have some mold, but the rest of them are good. They can clean that up and reuse that in the fresh cut. So, but the rotation makes a big difference, and staying on top of it, and keeping things current and fresh. But to get back to the point I was making, there's a moment when I first got there. And I was stacking the limes. First thing I was asked to do was just like, there was a moment of almost like rapture, almost like bliss. I think just because of how hard the past has been. And just to be there doing this kind of simple act, you know, I wasn't doing, I was doing delivery before that, and I've got this old janky rattle trap. What are some other fun words? Not really rattle trap, but old car. So that was, it's constant worry putting all that miles. But just to be in a place, to be doing a task, to feel like I have some, I don't know. There's just kind of a moment of just bliss, of peace and bliss, like, this is nice. And again, it's short-lived because there's always politics and personalities and all this crap you got to put up with. Resentments and BS and people acting like fucking idiots. And I for a long time, I've been very anti-gossip. Even, I'd say anti-venting. Because my thought is talk to the person. Have the guts. Be a fucking courageous adult. And just be courageous and have a fucking conversation with somebody. If you're pissed off, if you're upset, if somebody said something, whatever, try to talk to the person. And if not, don't go around gossiping about people. I just find that such low-life behavior, such low quality. What's the word I'm looking for? Just so low, such low value. Low character. That's a good word for it. Low quality, low character type of a thing to do, type of behavior. And it just so toxifies a place, and it's so brutal. It can be so brutal, and it can just become like a runaway fire. That's where management and stuff can make a difference. But I've noticed it's just a feature of humanity. The people that have a high value or ethical standard, moral standard around these issues are few and far between. And there's also a shadow there that I feel I have around being so rigid about it. Like has been such a priority for me not to do that, and just to be surrounded by this shit happening and it to be so casual and normal. It's a recipe for my own destruction, holding on so tightly to that value. And in fact, it got me fired at the place I was at previously. And so there's consequences to your values and to your beliefs. And in an ideal world, in an ideal world, we communicate better. We talk to each other. Just talk to each other. Say, this really bummed me out, man. This really upset. And there's a dignity in doing it for yourself. There's a dignity in talking to other people, and there's respect shown to them and to the whole situation. Simplifies your life because you're not having to navigate. Because gossip is just such a bad. This is just so bad on so many levels. It creates all these little alliances and weird energetic shit. And so my strong tendency is in the other direction, and that's a good thing, a good value that I have, and it has done some good in my life. It's cleared out some of the detritus. But in a position like this where I need this job right now, and I've struggled for so long, and it's just so endemic, it's just a recipe for madness, trying to hold on to that value so strongly. So but the other thing is it can be kind of like overly scrupulous. That's where like the scrupulosity OCD comes in, and being overly moral, overly righteous, even though it doesn't really feel like self-righteousness. But I think it probably can come across that way, and well, it can come across that way. So yeah, you kind of set yourself up for constant conflict and friction. Now, does that mean you completely surrender and just become, part of that gossip and stuff? No, not at all. As much as possible, I try to avoid it. My thing is just show up, do the fucking job you're getting paid to do, shut the fuck up, and clock out. Just do a good job at your job. All the other stuff, like, can't you just be? It's a lack of accountability on one hand that drives me crazy about it. It's like, be accountable for your own shit. Anyways, you can see that it bothers me, but I don't mean it that strongly, to say it that strongly, shut the fuck up and do your job. But sometimes I feel that. It's like, can we just fucking do the fucking job, guys, that we're here to do? You're getting paid to do. How hard is that? But yeah, loosening up on some of that stuff doesn't mean that you participate in it. Like I say, I try to, as much as possible, just, and if you have that orientation, it is quite possible to avoid 80% of that. You just don't engage with it. You just, now when you overhear, well, let me not get into that, but, or yeah, reorient the conversation, things like that. And sometimes you do have to confront people and talk. But again, when you're working with a somewhat rough crowd, I guess that's the key word I keep using here, those confrontations also, it's like, how much time and effort and skill am I going to put into trying to hammer something out where, it's just, this is where this person is at, and am I really going to try to, I'm certainly not going to be able to change anybody. What you can do, in a confrontation or in a conversation is just express, from your perspective, how things are coming across and how you're reacting to it. And because the moment you attack, and, especially with people who don't have communicational skills, and it's just bound to, yeah, and so there's kind of a brutalist, maximalist communication style that tends to prevail in a lot of these places, and it's kind of an emergent thing that happens because you don't have really good guidelines and developed communication skills among people, and supervisor level, managerial level definitely sets a tone and a culture, and if they don't do it right, it can kind of just flourish. But you tend to have these just kind of harsh, I guess is kind of a I don't know, polite way of saying it, or one way of saying it, brutal or harsh way of communicating and resolving conflict. And I don't want to completely throw that out the window either, because sometimes you need, especially with some of these younger guys, and probably women too. I mean, it's another thing. I don't really enjoy working with a lot of these. Produce, in one sense, is nice because it's mostly guys, and I don't know, a lot of the female communication style, and especially unhealthy, the kind of unhealthy, that's, I mean, I don't want to make it quite so gendered, but there definitely are differences in communication styles, and some of the harder people to work with, I can say that much, are women. Not all women, for sure. There's some real, good, kind, down to earth, kind women. And there's a masculine shadow too on the male side, which is that kind of overly brutal, no room for communication or calibration of conversation, and being just, there's this constant vulgarity. That's another thing I don't really resonate with, from the kind of music that gets played sometimes in the back area, which is just total shit, total crap, to just a lot of the conversation is just like, man, this is just, again, just such low quality stuff. I'm just not a vulgar person, you know. Guess there have been times when I definitely have been, in certain ways, in certain kind of like comedic contexts, you know. But this stage of the game, I'd rather just not engage with a lot of that. You know, I like peace. I like quiet, you know. I like just straightforward, you know, conversation, genuine conversation, or not at all. Like, just bliss out in your own world, do your work, you know, be kind, be cordial, be respectful. But how much talking do we really need to do? I mean, I don't. These videos is, you know, that I do is a lot of talking, but it's anyways, but I guess one thing that's connected and all that, I think that's kind of a growth edge for me, is that, you know, I had an incident today with a manager who just was being a dick for no reason. Well, I mean, let me get to that, but there was a spill, you know, happens in grocery stores. Some lady spilled her drink, like this big, tall, full, I think Starbucks drink. It looked like coffee or something, iced coffee. I don't know what it was. Spilled it in our section, and there was just me and one other guy working right in that, out on the floor at that point. And there's you know, they've got protocols for all this stuff. You flag somebody down, make sure an employee stays there with the spill to kind of make sure nobody, you know, it's all kind of about, I'm sure, legalities and past litigation, you know, such a litigious country we live in. So there's all these, you know, industry standards and protocols, but, I mean, they make sense as well, you know, because accidents can happen. But the idea is you call somebody over, stay at the spill, or you stay at the spill and you get somebody to go and get the janitor, get cleaning supplies. And see, my intuition, and I've done this a number of times, is just to clean the thing up myself, rather than, the janitors are never around, or hardly ever when you need them, when you call them. Who knows when they get there? It's a big store. They may not hear their name being called. You know, they're sometimes not in their usual, you know, stations, hangout places. And so in the past, I've just said, fuck it, man. I'll just clean it, you know, change of pace, go do something different, clean this up. It's not that big of a deal. But see, that's the kind of thing, like, that, I don't know if it's a generational thing, that, like, younger people just don't have that sense of, like, motivation of, like, shit, you know, I'm just gonna step up. I'm gonna show some, what's the word? Initiative, and just take care of this. You don't really see that. And so in part, I think it's because the company has said, you know, get the janitor to clean up. I can't remember if they've said that in the training now. I'm kind of double guessing that. But definitely what I've seen most people do is they stand there and then they alert the janitor. But in some cases, I've just stepped in and cleaned up. It's like this learned helplessness or something, where people don't realize you can just clean this up. But anyway, so I called over a coworker. I said, could you stay here and I'll go get the little cone or whatever, the caution. It's not exactly a cone, but this thing that we put up by the spill to alert people, and just so that he can make sure nobody walks through it. And I went to find the janitor where they're usually at, wasn't there. And see, I guess I was just trying to play it by the books. It was a pretty big spill. I don't know, but for whatever reason, I went and couldn't find anybody. And yeah, in the past, there was one other spill. They have this stuff where this is getting way into the weeds, but they have this chemical agent. It's like a powder that you pour on these spills, and it absorbs it all, and then you just sweep up these little, whatever. Can't think of a good word for it. You just sweep up they're like these little crumbs or globules. I can't think of a good word. Sweep that up and throw it away. But this was quite a big spill, and in my mind, if I could get the janitor, they have a mop, and I actually did see their equipment. I just didn't see them, but I wasn't sure, should I grab their equipment? So for a variety of reasons, whatever, I went and I was gonna make an announcement or get somebody to help me to make an announcement to get the janitor to come, and couldn't get somebody to help me. And then this guy, one of the store managers, maybe assistant store manager, something like that, came walking by, and I asked him, I said, we got this spill. Is there any way you could help me get the janitor? And he just, was very, I guess, passive aggressive, just, looked at me and said, oh, you don't know how to use a mop? Or, yeah, just had this really kind of like frozen smile on his face, and like, just, it's like, man, I'm the one who's trying to resolve this. Anyways, I'll get to that, because it was just kind of like, man, what the hell? And so I was kind of taken aback, not the response I expected, and it's hard when you just kind of get so brutally shifted into somebody else's reality, especially when you're trying to do something good and trying to go by the books, and you're taking the initiative to try to figure this out. And I've been real kind to the customer too, which is appropriate. It's like accidents happen, and reassured her like, oh, don't worry about it. And I even told her, thanks for telling us, because lots of times people just spill and just keep pushing, don't notify anybody. So I was like intentionally kind to her, and I think she appreciated it. And anyways, so this guy seems to be having a shitty day, or I don't know what's going on, but he's being a dick. So, and I say, well, no, I pause for a second. I'm like, fuck, I want to. Anyways, I was kind of pissed off, but I said, no, I'm just trying to do what I've been told to do, what I've been shown to do. And see, now I'm kind of second guessing that. I can't remember exactly what I was specifically told. But I know most people in these situations contact the janitors. So anyways, I just said I was just trying to do the right thing. I was trying to do what I was trained or told. And that, I don't mind doing whatever to clean it up. In fact, I probably would have preferred just to do it myself. That's how I've done it in the past. This is the one time I was trying something different. So, and then, so we tracked, he does the same thing I did, can't find the janitor. So he grabs the janitor's equipment, takes the mop over, and just being real, like unnecessarily rude, real extra, if I'm using that idiom right. And so we get there, and I say, okay, I won't say his name, but I say, okay, blank. So you asked me to, or I said I could take it from here. I can mop it up from here. And he says, "Oh no, I got it." I say, "With all due respect, man." I pause for a second. I say, "With all due respect, man, you just asked me to mop it up. Can I mop it up?" And he says, I can't remember what he said. He said, "Oh, well, I wouldn't ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do." Which, in another context, I could hear that. That's a reasonable thing to say. But this context is just like, what the hell is going on here? So, long story long, and that's way too much information, but it helps me to kind of process these things too. And to make the broader point that got me off on this tangent, I went. So I'm kind of pissed off and just like, what the hell, man? No good deed goes unpunished, or I don't know. I'm just kind of pissed off. And this coworker, the other guy who was out on the floor, he comes up to me and he's talking about something. I think he's kind of venting a little bit about how dirty the shelves are. People haven't been cleaning them, or I can't remember. I don't know what he's saying, but I was like, fuck it, man. I'm tired of being the like high ground moral guy, and everybody else is passing the shit around. And not that I went like full throttle, like nuking this guy, but I vented to the coworker. I just said, basically a shortened version of what I just said now. And this guy's an older guy, and pretty kind guy, pretty kind person. And we talk a bit, kind of cordial, kind of friendly with each other. And yeah, he seems like a kind guy, generally speaking. Now he can kind of get off on his venting too a little bit, so, or at least that's how I've seen it. Anyways, but yeah, so I vented something I just have refrained from doing, I guess, out of my own sense of moral values, etc., and wanting to live a different life. But it felt good. It felt good to vent, and I think I was still fairly balanced, fairly skillful, but expressed some emotion. I had expressed a little bit of emotion towards this guy. So that's the skill too, is finding a way to express yourself in the moment. And it's hard, especially when you get slammed into somebody else's like energetic confusion, to like orient and to figure out, shit, that doesn't feel good. Process, oh, that's bad. Okay, this is what I'm feeling. Fuck this guy. Okay, so that's what I want to say. Now, how do I communicate that in a way that can be heard? How do I stay honest and grounded and rooted? And what is this person capable? And doing all that kind of calculation and reflection. It's hard to do that in the moment. You go through enough of these that you develop some kind of shorthand and some skills. I've tried to talk about in other videos. And so I try to just show myself a lot of grace with that, because I think there's value in not being super reactive, first of all. It's not really the direction I feel oriented towards. But I think there's a growth edge there that I'm kind of playing with. And I feel like I did kind of express some of that energy back at that guy in a way that didn't exactly escalate it, in a way that I felt kind of showed some dignity, But not totally cleared the air. And anyway, so I talked with the coworker, and I even, afterwards kind of said, hey, sorry for venting, but I just kind of got pissed off about this. And, and that's a growth edge for me, is like, where is that line where I'm just getting caught up in gossip and venting, and I'm so far to the other edge? I think there is some room for me to be a little bit more human with all this and express myself and, have some relational stuff in there. I still, and I'll get to the point about this. Yeah, it's not like an endorsement of gossiping, and I'm even playing around with trying to draw a distinction between gossiping and venting, and I don't know if that's a valid thing, and concerns about am I being hypocritical and all that stuff, but anyway, so I just kind of let it rip a little bit, and afterwards say, hey, you know, sorry for venting. But we both kind of expressed a few things. Maybe I kind of blew him over a little bit, the coworker and I that I was talking to. And I thought to myself, you know, Lord, bring me into contact with this manager again. It's a big store, so some days you don't really cross paths more than once, or not even at all, with some people. But so bring me into contact in a way, in an obvious moment with this guy, and I'm gonna try to talk to him, because I settled down a little bit and felt like I could, you know, express things in a little bit better way. And that moment happened after I ate lunch, ran into him, and I said, hey, do you have a minute? And he said, yeah, and we went to one of these offices, closed the door, and I've been trying this, you know, in many different ways. If you've watched some of the older videos, I've talked about this, these experiments, communicating with people and working these things out. And so, and the idea is to stay connected and to be authentic, you know, but to also be, the idea is not really to win. It's kind of at a baseline. It's just to express yourself. I mean, it kind of shades into some higher, more noble ideals of, like, you know, leave an opening there. You're not trying to torch the person, really. You're trying to express yourself and clear that energy to some extent. But that hopefully there's a possibility of transformation there in the conversation. And so, yeah, we sat down, I leaned on a couple of desks, and I started out, and I think this was good. I asked him how he was doing, and because when you're pissed off, you tend to get so myopic about something that you kind of don't have the bandwidth to see other people and to see a circumstance more globally. So try to move in that direction at least a little bit. You know, I say, how are you doing? And I appreciate you taking the time. I know you guys that we're all busy, but I know you're a manager and you're busy, and so I appreciate you taking the time, and that was authentic, I think, for the most part. And I do appreciate the chance to talk to somebody, and because you'd be surprised, even getting that far with a lot of people is not an option. And I said, you know, I'm a very imperfect person. Before I say anything here, I just want to say, and you may have noticed, but I am a very imperfect person. You know, I've got flaws, or I don't know if I said that, but I said I'm a very imperfect person. And so I just want to say that from the beginning so it doesn't come across like I'm, you know, whatever. And I think that's a good way to start, you know, kind of soften things up a little bit. It's good for me to say it, to hear myself say it, and hopefully good for somebody to hear that. But anyways, and so I said that, and I said, you know, I wanted to try to clear the air on things that happened earlier, on the interaction earlier. I was really kind of upset. I was really kind of bummed out by how things went down. And then I started to be a little bit more specific. I said, I was really just trying to take care of the situation. Or I said, you know, imperfect as I am, you know, one thing I can say is I'm a hard worker. You know, I come in, I work hard, I show up, and I'm an adult. Is the other thing that I said. It's like, you know, having somebody ask me, do you know how to mop? And you're a grown ass adult. That's just like infuriating. It's really just disrespectful. But anyways, so I said, you know, I'm a hard worker. I'm an adult, and I don't know exactly what I said, but that, you know, express basically what I've said here, that it was, you know, felt really kind of passive aggressive. And anyways, we're kind of going back and forth, and I'm just so used to, especially at this workplace and previous workplaces, people just not being able to have a mature conversation, you know, be accountable. And I even say stuff like, I don't know exactly how you meant it, or I don't know from your side, or I don't know how I phrase it, but I try to say from my side, this is how it came off, my perspective. But pretty much from the beginning, this guy said, no, I messed up. He just said, I messed up. I'm sorry. And I could see that from your perspective completely, totally. And you are a hard worker. You're one of the, our best guys back in that section, or I don't know what he said, something like that. And it was awesome. And it was just totally awesome. It was really awesome. And yeah, and he apologized a number of times, just straight out, just I apologize. And he said, afterwards, I thought, man, I didn't get that one right. I didn't do that right. I messed that one up. And just showed like I feel like a man starving, or a dehydrated man in the desert, just any little drop of water. I mean, he definitely, it was more than a drop of water, because but I'd be satisfied just with a modicum of self-awareness among, people, or, the ability to have a mature conversation. And he did that, and it just instantly dissipated everything. It's just so simple. It's so fucking simple, man. It's crazy how much bad blood and energy and heartache and addiction and craziness. But you just have the humility to take just some basic accountability, or just say, hey, I apologize, I'm sorry, or, And he did that. He really did that. It surprised me. It shocked me. Utterly shocked. It's just such a rare thing. I was just shocked. Utterly shocked. And I told him, I was like, wow, that's really humble of you to say that. And I tried to encourage that, and to actively say, thanks. I really appreciate that. I don't know if I said thanks. I say, I really appreciate you saying that. And man, wonderful. Just so wonderful. So straightforward, and just a good, clearing of the air. And yeah, and even further than that, he kind of opened up. He's like, yeah, that's just one of my pet peeves, and about people, wanting other people to do stuff, and that kind of, I think he was implying that situation kind of triggered that pet peeve of his, and even though it wasn't really that wasn't really the reality of what was going on, but he showed some self-awareness about, reflecting on why that was an issue for him, why he acknowledged it, basically, the passive aggressiveness. So you start to question yourself after a while. When you're an intuitive person and you're living in this world of so much deceit and duplicity and lack of accountability, lack of integrity, you start to go a little bit, mad. It's like gaslighting in a sense, or you start to question your own reality when nobody's ever willing to acknowledge anything, or to have just a sober, grounded conversation. It can be kind of hard to maintain any kind of equilibrium. You got to do a lot of practice, and you have to have a lot of inner resources. But this was just such a great little confirmation of no, you were right to feel everything that you felt. You're right. And he acknowledged it in a very transparent way, very humble way. So it was great. And I think I was going to say, and he even, he was giving me some insight about, certain ways that he relates, because he said, when he was younger, he started out and he felt like he wasn't getting a lot of respect, didn't get a lot of respect, and so he developed these certain strategies and being harsh and doing all this stuff. I mean, it was like, wow, this guy is really just being, direct and offering insight, all this stuff, man. It was wild. It was a very wild experience, but it just such a great thing. And so you don't feel like gloating in those situations. You just feel like connected, okay, this is a connection here. Just diffuses the situation. And anyways, I just wanted to share that So it's been a real struggle. It's real nice when those things happen. And it demoralizes you too when you have people acting like that towards you, when you're trying to do good stuff and you're trying to hold a good standard and do the right thing and work hard, and people are just being shitty. It's like, you just feel demoralized. And so when you have a good interaction, and even him saying stuff like, yeah, he recognized, even though doesn't work all that, he kind of moves all around the store, and we don't really interact that much, but he said, he said, yeah, you're a good worker. You come in, and you didn't do anything wrong in this situation. Just those little things is like, it fuels you, and you feel more like, okay, I can do this. I can work here. I can, there's another human being here. It feels nice. You feel, I don't know if moralized is the opposite of demoralized, but you feel good. Yeah, so, and there's some other threads in there. I don't know if I should go into those. So yeah, I mean, there's a growth edge in many different directions of like, allowing myself to vent a little bit. I've had to just let go of a lot of stuff, that I would usually want to address directly, just because it's just for my own sanity, because there's just so much unhealthy kind of stuff going on. But so you can't really expect much. You can expect something from yourself, but even there, those expectations can be really oppressive too. You're just a human. You're just trying your best. If you're a thoughtful person, if you care, if you're trying, I think that's enough. Ask forgiveness if you mess up. And but yeah, it's nice, because when that kind of brutalist, maximalist, harsh ethos reigns in a place, it's kind of a breath of fresh air to be able to have just kind of I don't know if vulnerable is the right word, but just an honest interaction like that, unguarded. It's hard not to shield up and get guarded. And I don't know if I made this point already, but there's a place in certain contexts for being kind of harsh and direct. I think it's always like a lesser way of interaction, but some people just don't know how, or too afraid to have an honest conversation. Too much is at stake in their identity structure. I don't know. I don't think I've ever, I don't think I ever really get quite in the direction of some of those things. There's definitely times, firmness, I can get firm sometimes. But even there, it's like you end up kind of depolarizing, decreasing your own charge and value and self-esteem, and somehow you do damage to yourself when you nuke other people. And that's part of the dangers of gossip, but also part of the dangers of being overly brutal, overly harsh with people, is you end up kind of disrespecting yourself. You're disrespecting the other person, and maybe they do need to be called out. But if you fly off the handle, if you're using a lot of just trash language and saying a bunch of extra stuff, and there's a place for being firm, there's a place for being direct, saying no, we're not doing that. Fuck. Or here's me using salty language, but yeah, fuck that, or I don't appreciate that. There's a place for that energy for sure. But few people ride that line in a way that I think is long-term helpful, long-term skillful. Anyways, I don't want to get into all that, but so they're just kind of observations I want to make about produce for some reason. Something nice, about, the whole thing is kind of interesting. Just how the whole process works, that we're getting in fruit from all over the world, literally, quite literally. Well, let's see, Ecuador, I've seen come through, Peru, definitely Mexico. It's interesting, learning more about where we're getting our fruit from. California, obviously Texas. Those are California, Texas, Florida, Washington. Probably the main places in the States that I've seen. Trying to think. And then, of course, some, local things also. But, yeah, I kind of don't want to get too much, anyways. But yeah, I'd say the main places: California, Texas, Florida, Washington, maybe Oregon. I think Washington, with apples and cherries and stuff like that. So that's kind of interesting. But also just, some stuff from, yes, Quebec in Canada. It's got French and English stuff on some of the blueberries. Canadian flag, so I guess it would be Quebec. Just, thinking about the whole supply chain and how this stuff gets from the field to then being, harvested at the appropriate time and packaged, sent to a distribution or to a holding facility. I don't know all the right terminology. A warehouse, I guess. And, distribution center, whatever, picked up by trucks, transported across, I guess by planes, maybe by boats. I guess boats wouldn't make sense for produce. Planes, trains, maybe. I'm thinking, in some of the international stuff, probably just planes and then onto trucks. The national, domestic stuff onto trucks. Then arrives at our warehouse, and then the whole art packing these pallets and arranging them, and on the store side, there's an art to ordering and rotating the seasonal stuff and anticipating sales, and so you order more of a certain thing and pull back on certain things as they're going out of season, and getting all of that, the amount coming in, right? So you're not just overwhelmed with how much you have in your storage back there, but also so that you have, ample produce on the floor. There's just this whole network, and any one aspect of it is too complicated pretty much for a human mind, but there's a synergy and, just kind of, I guess, in a sense, you could say an organic thing that has developed across the eons, especially in the past decades with industrial, the industrial science of all of this, coordinating all of these networks, and then down to, stuff getting taken in off the trucks, pallets, then broken down and taken from the boxes, bringing them out onto the floor, and, rotating, removing, restocking. Just the whole process is kind of wild. There's something nice about, connecting with produce and the fruit, and again, in some sense, it's shocking the amount of, they call it shrink, the amount of stuff that gets thrown out. Especially if there's some buddy or something that's kind of dropping the ball somewhere along the way. It shows up, either pallets come in with stuff smashed on them. That could be one thing. They're not doing good rotating when they're breaking down the pallets and, bringing forth the old stuff back in the refrigerator, and so stuff gets lost in there, and we end up, they end up not rotating it right, and so can lose a lot of product that way, a lot of produce that way. Or, you have stuff out on the floor go wrong. Whatever the word I can't think of. The little refrigerated islands. Sometimes we're having troubles with one of those, so it's not really keeping the grapes cool enough, and it may just be a bad batch. I mean, there are a lot of ways for this process to go astray, but it's kind of, I don't know if the term is economies of scale, but you just have so much of it going through, and you're making enough money because the endeavor is so big, the enterprise is so big, that it's just a cost that's calculated into the, it's just an ingredient in the recipe, that you're going to have a certain amount of shrink. And in a way, I could also say out of the other side of my mouth, it's kind of remarkable that there isn't more, because it's kind of a miracle how much goes into all this to have this little apple get placed out there. That's traveled so far, gone through so many steps, so many, steps of this process. Your little package of raspberries or whatever. There's something miraculous about how much does actually make it. So it's kind of both. It's kind of shocking how much that gets thrown out, but the whole process is kind of amazing. And not all the produce is great, especially as you transition seasons and you still got stuff put out there. I mean, during peak season, there's some fantastic, especially, we're coming out of summer. So whatever, late April, May through to August, a little bit into September, there's just some fantastic, sweet, juicy, consistently good produce. But the growing season is a real thing, and so anyways, kind of a random, all over the place video. But yeah, I've been praying up, man. I've been praying, calling out to Jesus, especially the past couple days. I have a friend, I talked about in a previous video, a Christian friend. I called and I texted him, asked for some prayer support. And I had this, kind of remarkable interaction today that I talked about in this video. And that was one of the things I asked for prayer support on, was difficulty with coworkers, or difficult coworkers. So anyways, I don't know how this all works, but asking for help, asking for support. I also felt like I wanted to tie up a loose end. In one of the previous videos, I shared this experience about this kind of remarkable experience I had involving the Bible, involving past life, I guess, Lazarus and John chapter 11, all this stuff. I did express in the video, but I kind of listened back through it, and afterwards I thought I didn't really, say strong enough. I don't feel at all, puffed up or anything about that. The point of sharing that story, and I've never shared it before with anybody, not even with anybody, I just haven't shared it with anybody. It was a really special experience, and it was just a very comforting thing. Is I'm not like staking my identity on it or making any claims about anything. I just was reporting the experience and just saying it was helpful. It was a really helpful experience, but I'm not like, what's the word? Delusions of grandeur, and investing anything in that identity as such, that I had this. Anyways, you can watch the video, but the whole point I was just trying to make is how comforting and rich and important and good and great and transformative in some ways. The experience has really helped me a lot. It really has been a good thing, a supportive thing. Beautiful, just beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. Not because I'm special or something like that. No, it was just, I felt really held, like God saying, I'm with you, I love you, I'm with you. You're safe. I love you, I see you, I'm with you, you're safe. It's special and intimate in that way, and that's kind of why I hesitated to even share it. But anyways, take care.